Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Just as the external energy consists of two parts, the efficient cause nimitta and the material cause upadana, Maya being the efficient cause and pradana the material cause, so Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, assumes two forms to create the material world with the efficient and material causes. Okay, this is a 9.5 page purport. Yeah, and it's very dense, very philosophical, very cerebral. There's a huge quote in here from Baladev Vijabhushana. So it's not Prabhupada's words, it's Prabhupada quoting Baladev Vijabhushana, who explains in detail the atheistic philosophy of Kapila and then gives a detailed response. How would you all like me to deal with this purport today? Read some of it. Okay, because it took me well over a half an hour just to read it and study it without reading it out loud. So, I mean, we could just have the whole class just reading the purport. Yes?
If you already went through, you can just highlight the main points.
Well, but I was thinking about that, but it'd be a shame not to read Srila Prabhupada's purport. I was considering that. Any other thoughts? Yeah? Yes. Do you want me to read the whole purport and then talk on it for 5 minutes? Do you want me to read little bits and talk on it? Little bit. Slowly. Okay. How late do you want to stay? No, seriously. I'm really asking seriously.
You won't be able to stay long because there's a wedding.
There's a wedding today. What time is the wedding? Straight on after class. So what time do we have to be out of here? 8:30. Okay, one last question is, for how many of you is English a second or third or fourth language? Please raise your hand if English is a second, third, or fourth language. Okay. Those of you who have English as a second, third, fourth language, can you understand me if I talk at a regular American pace? Is there anyone who needs me to talk very slowly? Okay, I'm going to read this as if I'm talking to other native American speakers, which probably, there's only like 2 or 3 of you are those. If I'm going too fast, just tell me and we'll adjust, all right? So I think what I'll do, I'll read through and make brief comments, and then maybe we'll have 5 minutes at the end to say something. Purport. I want you to listen very carefully. Please don't sleep during Prabhupada's purport. That's the most important part of any class. There are 2 kinds of research to find the original cause of creation. Oh, what I want you to listen for is why this is important. There's one sentence in this whole purport that tells you why this purport is important. Why Srila Prabhupada dedicated 9.5 pages of his books to this discussion. There's one sentence in this purport. It's when Prabhupada's talking about Baladev Vijabhushana. I'll give you a hint. I want you to find it without looking in a book. There are 2 kinds of research to find the original cause of creation. One conclusion is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the all-blissful, eternal, all-knowing form, is indirectly the cause of this cosmic manifestation and directly the cause of the spiritual world, where there are innumerable spiritual planets known as Vaikunthas, as well as his personal abode known as. In other words, there are 2 manifestations, the material cosmos and the spiritual world. As in the material world, there are innumerable planets and universes. So the scientists wonder, are there innumerable universes? The answer is yes. So in the spiritual world, there are also innumerable spiritual planets and universes. What did Prabhupada say? In the? Including the Vaikunthas and Goloka. The Supreme Lord is the cause of both the material and spiritual worlds. That was the first kind of research. Second kind of research. The other conclusion, of course, is that this cosmic manifestation is caused by an inexplicable, unmanifested void. So that's what the scientists say right now. That's the prevalent theory. right? That there was an inexplicable, unmanifested void. And somehow in that inexplicable, unmanifested void, there became a chunk of matter that was unlimitedly small and unlimitedly dense, and it exploded. But we don't want to hear any supernatural explanations from the scriptures. We just want to hear science. Does that make any sense to anybody? So the scientists are saying that our account of a person who creates is superstition, is primitive, is supernatural. And then what do they propose as an alternative? An inexplicable, unmanifested void that suddenly manifests some chunk from nowhere with no cause that's unlimitedly small and unlimitedly dense. And then again, without any cause, it explodes. And when it explodes, it makes universes and planets. But that's not a supernatural explanation. What do you think? It's very scientific. And there was somebody there recording it also, which is how they know that that's what happened. Okay. The first conclusion, what was the first conclusion? That everything's created by? Okay. The first conclusion is accepted by the Vedanta philosophers, and the second is supported by the atheistic philosophical system of the Sankhya Smriti. So this philosophy of the being inexplicable, meaningless void, unmanifested void, this isn't just some new philosophy. These two philosophies have been extant for a long time, which directly opposes the Vedantic philosophical conclusion. Material scientists cannot see any cognizant spiritual substance that might be the cause of creation. They just can't. They can't see it, therefore it's not there. So I don't see the cognizant spiritual person who made this painting, therefore there wasn't any. That's their logic. Such atheistic Sankhya philosophers think that the symptoms of knowledge and living force visible in the innumerable living creatures are caused by the three qualities of the cosmic manifestation. So they think that matter combines to make consciousness and knowledge. Therefore, the Sankhiyites are against the conclusion of Vedanta regarding the original cause of creation. Factually, the supreme absolute spirit soul is the cause of every kind of manifestation, and he is always complete, both as the energy and as the energetic. The cosmic manifestation is caused by the energy of the supreme absolute person, in whom all energies are conserved. Philosophers who are subjectively engaged in the cosmic manifestation can appreciate only the wonderful energies of matter. Such philosophers accept the conception of God only as a product of the material energy. What does that sentence mean? Man-made. What is man-made? The idea of God. They say the idea of God is man-made, that we have a God gene. Somehow, because evolution is just a series of billions of mistakes anyway. You know that, right? That's their philosophy. That through billions of mutations, some of which ended up to be favorable, we end up having life. And, we have some residual mistakes hanging around. And one of them is this gene that makes us believe that there's a God. And really, all of spiritual experiences are just some sort of electrical brain activity. So that's their idea. So such philosophers wrongly observe that the living... Such philosophers accept the conception of God only as a product of the material energy. According to their conclusions, the source of the... Now listen to this. According to their conclusions, the source of the energy is also a product of the energy. The source of the energy is also a product of the energy. What do you get then? A what? Nothing. You get a circle. The source of the energy is a product of the energy. Well, that would be a perpetual energy machine. It'd be kind of interesting. Such philosophers wrongly observe that the living creatures within the cosmic manifestation are caused by the material energy. And they think that the supreme absolute conscious being must similarly be a product of the material energy. So they think that we're just matter, we're just machines, and if there is any God, he's also just a material machine or a material concept. What a depressing philosophy. Do you like someone who treats you like a machine? Have you ever had anybody in your life who treated you like you were a machine, like you had no feelings? Ever dealt with somebody like that? Isn't that depressing? Who wants to believe this? Why would you want to believe that? You're only a machine. I don't even understand why it's attractive. Since materialistic philosophers and scientists are too much engaged with their imperfect senses, naturally they conclude that the living force is a product of material contamination. So they come to this conclusion because that's all they're absorbed in. That's all they see. But the actual fact is just the opposite. Matter is a product of spirit. According to the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Spirit, the personality of Godhead, is the source of all energies. When one advances in research work by studying this is quite a sentence. When one advances in research work by studying a limited substance within the limits of space and time, one is amazed by the various wonderful cosmic manifestation. And there, naturally, one goes on hypnotically accepting the path of research work or the inductive method. We could look at that sentence. We don't have Chintamani or Krishna Dharma here. We could look at this sentence for a long time. When one advances in research work, that sounds good, right? Advancing in research work, that sounds like it's a good thing. By studying a limited substance within the limits of space and time. So you take within the limits of space and time, which don't exist in the spiritual world, by the way. The first thing in the material world is time. So time and space are part of illusion. So if you're within space and time and you're studying a limited substance and you really advance in research of that limited substance. So you get really expert in understanding this limited substance within the limits of space and time. One is amazed by the various wonderful cosmic manifestations. So you get amazed by matter. And naturally, one goes on hypnotically accepting the path of research work or the inducted method. So you're in this limited bubble with limited vision and you're studying very intensely and everything's so wonderful you actually get hypnotized by it. And you think, yeah, I want to do more and more of, look at all these wonderful cosmic manifestations. So if you're really interested in this concept, I suggest you read Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolution with a study guide. It's hard reading. But he discusses this whole phenomena of how that when you study a certain aspect of material nature, you get hypnotized by it. And you actually create you imagine your own paradigm of reality in which you start explaining everything. Now Prabhupada's going to compare inductive method with deductive. Do you know the difference between inductive and deductive? Anybody know the difference? By the way, we should mention as a side note that purports like this assume a tremendous amount of knowledge on the part of the reader. Srila Prabhupada is using terms here without necessarily explaining them, assuming that the people reading his books have a lot of education and a lot of knowledge. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. So there are some people in the Hare Krishna movement who proposed that Srila Prabhupada wanted the children of the movement to have a very low-grade education. Now, Srila Prabhupada wanted our children to be able to read his books. In order to read Srila Prabhupada's books intelligently, one would have to have a very high-grade level of education. Now, there's even some people now in the Hare Krishna movement making propaganda that all the girl children of the movement should be denied an education and should grow up illiterate as a policy. They're making a lot of propaganda to this effect. And some of these people, anyway, Hare Krishna. But then they wouldn't be able to read Srila Prabhupada's books. And it's not just learning how to read. It's not just being able to sound out the words in Srila Prabhupada's books, but being able to understand the concepts that he's talking about takes quite a lot of education. So that's just a little side advertisement from sorry, I can't resist that after so many years working with children in the Hare Krishna movement and having so many people tell me Vedic education means ignorance. So, in so many words, they don't say that directly. They say if it's really a Gurukul, the kids won't learn much. I'm like, okay. All right. So Prabhupada's talking about induction and deduction. What's the difference? What is induction and what's deduction? Yes?
Induction means the result is determined before you start the journey. Deduction means you explore, you come to the results as you become.
Opposite. But thank you. Yes. So induction, you don't know where you're going. Now there's some more extreme forms of induction. But the idea of induction is you're just taking in data. You're just impartially, without any bias, taking in data. And after you amass a certain amount of data, you generalize from that data and form a conclusion. Deduction is you start with some truths, you start with some a priori understandings, you start with some generalizations, and then you research to find those generalizations. Now, Thomas Kuhn also makes the point that practically speaking, in science, nobody really does induction. That's simply an idea, but doesn't really happen. That everybody starts with the paradigm. And so it's quite interesting that if you study these things in school, at the undergraduate level and even at the master's level, they'll make a lot of propaganda that, yes, we're really doing the scientific method and it works. We can just be absorbed in our senses and gather data, and just from an impartial, unbiased gathering of data, especially if a lot of people do it, then that nullifies the individual bias. Then we can actually come to some generalizations which we can test and come up with theories and come up with laws of nature. Once you get to the PhD level, they tell you that's a bunch of bunk. It's quite interesting. Then you'll have classes where they'll say, let us tell you what's wrong with the inductive method in the scientific process. Let us tell you why it doesn't give you any kind of surety of knowledge. And now that you've had this course in what's wrong with our process of research, we want you to go out and research. That's exactly what they do. And that's why scientific literature is full of perhaps and maybe. That's why when you read scientific research, you'll find the researchers are always hedging. They never say it is. They never say we know. They say maybe and perhaps it could be, because at that level they know very well that they're not working with anything solid. But until you get to that level, it's a secret. They have, if you look at even undergraduate or master's level textbooks and courses, they're still trying to put out, yes, our system is giving you knowledge. And then you get to the higher level and you get this kind of shock, it was such a shock for me going to this course and having them say all the things that Srila Prabhupada says is wrong with scientific knowledge, that they actually admit it. So I was just like, wow, they're admitting that they don't know what they're doing. Why don't they tell people in general? And they couch it in very difficult language, that it takes you 2 hours to read a couple pages and understand what in the world they're talking about. It's all couched in very academic language so that they don't just say things straight out. So it takes a while for you to even understand at that level, what are they talking about? And the bottom line is, we have no idea what we're doing. None of our processes work. We're all fools, but go ahead and do the research anyway. Okay. Through the deductive way of understanding, however, one accepts the Supreme Absolute Person, the personality of Godhead, as the cause of all causes, who is full with diverse energies and who is neither impersonal nor void. The impersonal manifestation of the Supreme Person is another display of his energy. Therefore, the conclusion that matter is the original cause of creation is completely different from the real truth. The material manifestation is caused by the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is inconceivably potent. What a nice description of Krishna. Inconceivably potent. Each of us have some potency, but it's limited, isn't it? And it's prone to be frustrated. But Krishna is inconceivably potent. He just looks at nature. What is his glance, by the way? Shiva. His glance is Shiva, or time. So material energy is sleeping, and he wakes her up with his glance of time. Time is the beginning of illusion. It's the beginning of the material creation, and this time is Lord Shiva, the destructive factor. That's how we notice time, right? things getting destroyed. Material nature is electrified by the supreme authority, and the conditioned soul within the limits of time and space is trapped by awe of the material manifestation. In other words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually realized in the vision of a materialistic philosopher in science through the manifestations of his material energy. So the materialistic scientist who's becoming amazed by the material energy, what they're really being amazed by is Krishna. They're just not identifying what they're being amazed by. They don't realize what's the real source of their amazement. For one who does not understand the power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his diverse energies because of not knowing the relationship between the source of the energies and the energies themselves. So that's the problem. The problem is getting, bewildered by the energies because I don't know what they have to do with their source. There is always a chance of error, which is known as bivarta. So if you don't know the substrata, you don't know the source, the cause, you're going to make errors, which they admit openly. If you say, is your science full of errors? They'll say, well, of course. As long as materialistic scientists and philosophers do not come to the right conclusion, certainly they will hover above the material field, bereft of proper understanding of the absolute truth. Okay, now we're going to come, so that was about 2 pages, and the rest of the purport, basically, I think it's the whole rest of the purport, is Srila Prabhupada quoting from Baladev Vijayabhushana. So this is a little bit harder because even what we've read so far, Prabhupada's language was a little difficult. He doesn't always speak in quite such difficult language. And now that he's going to quote from Baladev Vijayabhushana, it's going to get a little harder. Have you been okay up till now? Everybody been with us up till now? Okay. The great Vaishnava philosopher Srila Baladev Vijayabhushana has very nicely explained the materialistic conclusion in his Govinda Bhasya, a summary on the Vedanta Sutta. He writes as follows. Okay, so now he's going to explain the materialistic side. This is important to know that. It's important to know what your opponents are saying. Okay. We don't just present our point of view. We also present the opposite point of view. I remember Jai Dorje Maharaj telling me when one paper I wrote, he said, you've always got to present the strongest arguments of the opposing side. So that's fair debate. Fair debate is I don't attack the other person on personal grounds, and I look at the strongest arguments on their side. Oh, actually, no, there is one paragraph in here where Srila Prabhupada's talking in the middle. And it's in this one paragraph that Prabhupada's inserted into in this translation of Baladev Vijayabhushana that he gives the whole point. Remember I asked you to look for that? So I'm giving you an even greater hint where you're going to find it. Okay, here we are quoting from Baladev Vijayabhushana. The Sankhya philosopher Kapila has connected the different elementary truths according to his own opinion. Material nature, according to him, consists of the equilibrium of the 3 material qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Material nature produces the material energy known as Mahat, and Mahat produces the false ego. Got that? Material energy produces the false ego. What's the false ego? I and mine. Actually, there is a real I and mine too. I am Krishna's and Krishna is mine. That's the real I and mine. So what is the false ego? I'm this body as a result of that. I'm independent. I'm in control. I'm the enjoyer. I'm the center. I'm the center of the universe. Everything is supposed to revolve around me. I'm the doer. I'm the creator. I'm the most important living entity in the universe. Rather funny things if you think about them. Each one of them. Prahladananda Swami gave one class on this topic, and I think we didn't stop laughing the entire class. Because each of these is actually a very humorous and absurd proposition. I'm the center of the universe. Right. Most of the living entities on this planet don't know I exist and don't care. Big center of the universe. Even my good friends don't care that much about me, frankly. I mean, I've got a lot of friends here in this room, but if I sat any of you down and said, would you listen to me for a half an hour and I'll tell you what I did yesterday? You probably wouldn't be interested. You might just be polite. So, the fact that or the controller. You ever tried to control something? How successful are we? Oh, Hare Krishna. Or that we're the enjoyer, that we're meant to enjoy everything. So these are all very funny. But the material nature produces this false ego, this false sense of self. The ego, now this is also interesting. Why, we could talk about these things for a month or so. The ego produces the 5 objects of sense perception. What are the objects of sense perception? Yeah? Touch, taste, smell, sound. That's produced by the false ego. Now, by the way, materialistic philosophers, they really try to understand, what is this place? And what's the relationship between our sense of self and our sense objects and our senses, and what do we really understand, and what's real and what's not real? Is there an objective reality? Does reality just exist in our minds? Does each of us have a different reality from everybody else? And they don't have any idea what the answer is. If you really want to know what mental speculation is, you just check out, I'm not suggesting you do it, but if you really want to know what it is, you can check out some of these philosophers that try to talk about, who am I? What is sense objects? What is my senses? What's the relationship between my senses and the sense objects? Where is actual perception taking place? Where is experience taking place? What is experience? What does experience mean? And there's a lot of philosophers who discuss these things and just go in circles and try all sorts of different theories. And if you're forced to study these things, as I was, then you can't help but sit there. I mean, I just sat in the back reading Prabhupada's books because it was so silly. But you can't help but say all they have to do is read the Srila Prabhupada's purports and read the Bhagavatam, especially 2nd canto, 3rd canto. Really explains all of this amazing. So the ego produces the 5 objects of sense perception. Now, what does that mean? Something to contemplate. Which produce the 10 senses. 5 for acquiring knowledge and 5 for working, the mind and the 5 gross elements. So the false ego produces the sense objects, and the sense objects produce the senses. Yeah, really. Wow. How long could we try to figure out what that means? What does that actually mean? What, therefore, is the substance of anything? It's all based on illusion. It exists. We're not saying the material world doesn't exist. But our conception of what it is an illusion. It's all stemming from like Prabhupada says, if you have 2 + 2 is 5. Everything else you build on is wrong. So it starts with time, which is an illusion, and the spiritual world is always the present. So time electrifies the material energy, which then produces this false identity. The false identity then is what produces the sense objects, which then produce our ability to perceive the sense objects. So it's all based on a false conception. So it exists. It actually exists. And I read a wonderful purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita yesterday, where Prabhupada said that actually everything is spiritual. We're just perceiving it as material. So once we have this false perception, we take something that's spiritual, we take something that's the energy of the Supreme Spirit, the unlimitedly potent, cognizant, ever blissful Spirit, and we start perceiving it as something else. We start perceiving some of that energy as something meant for my enjoyment, something that's subject to time and space. Counting the Purusha, or the enjoyer, with these 24 elements, there are 25 different truths. The non-manifested stage of these 25 elementary truths is called Prakriti, or material nature. The qualities of material nature can associate in 3 different stages, namely as the cause of happiness, the cause of distress, and the cause of illusion. The quality of goodness is the cause of material happiness, the quality of passion is the cause of material distress, and the quality of ignorance is the cause of illusion. Our material experience lies within the boundaries of these 3 manifestations of happiness, distress, and illusion. For example, a beautiful woman is certainly a cause of material happiness for one who possesses her as a wife, but the same beautiful woman is a cause of distress to the man who she rejects or is the cause of her anger. And if she leaves a man, she becomes the cause of illusion. Interesting. We could talk about that for a long time also. And Prabhupada's comparing goodness, passion, ignorance, or actually Baladeva Vijabhushan, quoting the atheist Kapila, is explaining goodness, passion, ignorance as a source of happiness, distress, and illusion in regard to a beautiful woman. The two kinds of senses are the 10 external senses and the one internal sense, the mind. Thus there are 11 senses. According to Kapila, the atheist Kapila, material nature is eternal and all-powerful. Originally there is no spirit and matter has no cause. So who's God? Matter becomes God. Matter has no cause. Matter is eternal, all-powerful, and has no cause. So who is he worshiping? Matter. Isn't that disappointing? What a disappointment. Would you like to worship matter? But matter itself is the chief cause of everything. Wow. What a depressing philosophy. It is the all-pervading cause of all causes. You see how the atheists can't get away from supernatural stuff? They just can't. They want to accuse us theists of having, all these supernatural, fantastic things, eagles that fly in outer space, and, 10-headed demons, and you guys are all just into supernatural, fantastic things, and we're really logical scientists. But they're using the same supernatural language to describe their theories. They can't get away from it. The Sankhya philosophy regards the total energy, Mahatattva, the false ego, and the 5 objects of sense perception as the 7 diverse manifestations of material nature, which has 2 features, known as the material cause and the efficient cause. The Purusha, the enjoyer, is without transformation, whereas material nature is always subject to transformation. But although material nature is inert, it is the cause of enjoyment and salvation for many living creatures. How can something be inert? How can something that's inert be the cause of enjoyment and salvation? Its activities are beyond the conception of sense perception. Well, that sounds supernatural to me. So again, they're saying we have something that's not supernatural, but they describe it in a supernatural way. But still one may guess at them by superior intelligence, which of course these Sankhya philosophers have. Material nature is one, but because of the interaction of the 3 qualities, it can produce the total energy and the wonderful cosmic manifestation. Such transformations divide material nature into 2 features, namely the efficient and material causes. The Purusha, the enjoyer, is inactive and without material qualities, although at the same time he is the master. That makes sense. Existing separately in each and every body is the emblem of knowledge. By understanding the material cause, one can guess that the Purusha, the enjoyer, being without activity, is aloof from all kinds of the enjoyer being without activity. As soon as you get into atheistic philosophy, you have to end up with nonsensical conclusions. The enjoyer, being without activity, is aloof from all kinds of enjoyment. The enjoyer, being without activity, is aloof from all kinds of enjoyment. This is their atheistic philosophy. How can you be an enjoyer if you're aloof from all kinds of enjoyment? Or superintendence. Sankhya philosophy, after describing the nature of Prakriti, material nature, and Purusha, the enjoyer, asserts that the creation is only a product of their unification or proximity to one another. With such unification, the living symptoms are visible in material nature, but one can guess that in the person of the enjoyer, the Purusha, there are powers of control and enjoyment. When the Purusha is illusion for want of sufficient knowledge, he feels himself to be the enjoyer, and when he's in full knowledge, he is liberated. In the Sankhya philosophy, the Purusha is described to be always indifferent to the activities of Prakriti. The Sankhya philosopher accepts 3 kinds of evidences, namely direct perception, hypothesis, and traditional authority. So at least the Sankhya philosophers accept the authority of the scriptures, although they pervert them, whereas the modern scientists don't accept the authority of the scriptures. When such evidence is complete, everything is perfect. The process of comparison is within such perfection. Beyond such evidence, there is no proof. There is not much controversy regarding direct perceptual evidence or authorized traditional evidence. The Sankhya system of philosophy identifies 3 kinds of procedures, namely parinamat, transformation, samanvayat, adjustment, and shaktitaha, performance of energies, as the cause of the cosmic manifestation. Unquote. Now Srila Prabhupada is going to insert his own little paragraph, in which here he gives the reason why he's taking our time and energy to discuss these things. Srila Baladev Vijabhushana, in his commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, has tried to nullify this conclusion because he thinks that discrediting these so-called causes of the cosmic manifestation will nullify the entire Sankhya philosophy. Materialistic philosophers accept matter to be the material and efficient cause of creation. For them, matter is the cause of every type of manifestation. Generally, they give the example of a water pot and clay. Clay is the cause of the water pot, but the clay can be found as both cause and effect. The water pot is the effect, and clay itself is the cause, but clay is visible everywhere. A tree is matter, but a tree produces fruit. Water is matter, but water flows. In this way, say the Sankhites, matter is the cause of movements and production. As such, matter can be considered the material and efficient cause of everything in the cosmic manifestation. Srila Baladev Vijabhushana has therefore enunciated the nature of pradhana as follows. I'm going to end here because we have another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of quoting from Baladev Vijabhushana. So why did Srila Prabhupada say that this is important? What's the point? Yes?
If you nullify the cause, then you nullify the whole philosophy.
Yes. Thank you. If you nullify the cause, you nullify the whole philosophy. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada asked his scientist disciples, he said, you want to nullify this idea that matter is the cause. Because if you pull that out, the whole house collapses. The whole atheistic house collapses. Why do we care if the whole atheistic house collapses? What does it matter? Many people think, well, what the cause of the universe is, what the cause of myself is, what does it matter? Whether it's God or it's matter. Who cares? It's irrelevant. But you know what? In our own little lives, important at least to us, it does matter. We've got to figure out what the cause is of the things that go on in our life. Otherwise, how do we give them meaning? We have to know what's behind everything. You know, when Dharma the bull was being beaten by Kali, and Maharaj Parikshit comes to him and says, who's beating you? He says, well, we're not really sure. Some people say that the cause of all suffering, the cause of everything is inscrutable, which is like what Srila Prabhupada talked about here. Inexplicable. We just don't know. There's no real answers. We can't figure anything out. What happens if you have this sort of philosophy? We just don't know. It's inexplicable. It's inscrutable. Kind of an agnostic philosophy. How do you find any meaning in what you're doing? How does this brief flash of life, it's very brief. You turn around and it's over. You know? How does it have any meaning if that's your philosophy? I mean, you can try. Make an experiment sometime in the next week. Find a really good friend or good family member and say, hey, would you like to listen for a half an hour to what I did today? Even your really good friend. Or an hour. Or would you like a point-by-point blow? They do this sometimes. I'm not a member of Twitter, but I heard they do this kind of thing, you know. I just ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I just blew my nose. I just answered 5 emails. I'm walking down the street. I see a dog. You know, who really cares? I mean, really, try sitting down with your best friend. Our whole life, if we're really a big, famous person, our whole life is going to be summarized in a few paragraphs in the newspaper. You know, or maybe an article in BTG of 2,000 words for our whole life. And that's if we're really, really important. You know, maybe we'll warrant a little picture on the Vyasa Sun, and the devotees will have an excuse to eat a feast. You know, if you say that you can't understand anything, what's the meaning of this life? What does it mean? What is its value? What a depressing way to live. And if you say here, like the Sankhyats are also saying, well, it's just the material nature. Whatever happening, you know, so your first idea is, whatever happening to me, there's no cause. We can't understand it. It's just inexplicable. It's just inscrutable. Or if you say, well, whatever's happening to me in my life, it's just coming from the laws of material nature. It's just coming from matter. There's no direction to it. There's no soul. There's no person. There's no purpose. It's just the material nature. Somehow it has laws that just came from nowhere. And because of these laws, things combine in a certain way. And because of these laws, just circumstantially, I got a particular body and I have a particular life. And, it's just what happens. Everything is just matter. Then what kind of a life are you going to have? What's the meaning of your life? Then we're just a machine. Then I'm not different from a computer. Then all of my emotions and my desires, they're an illusion. They're just some electrical impulses in the brain. And then what's life for? Just getting as many things from my machine as possible? At the cost of anybody else, because nobody has real feelings or desires anyway. So why not exploit you? Why not exploit a whole country? Why not exploit the whole planet? Why not? The feelings of nothing else matters. They're not even real. Why not treat animals like they're machines? That's all they are. Pump them up with chemicals, keep them in little crates so they can't turn around, and then chop their head off and eat them. Why not? They're just machines. Why not treat other humans like that? They're just machines too. Why not make people in poor countries work really hard without medical insurance, and if they get hurt while they're working, oh well, too bad. So they can produce things and live in little huts without clean running water, so I can have all of my nice equipment. Why not? We're all just machines. Why not pollute the water and the air and everything? Who cares about future generations? They're just machines too. If the human race dies, what does it matter? As long as I can get something for myself now, shouldn't make any difference. All right, then another philosophy is it's all unreal. It doesn't exist at all. There is no material world. There's no you, there's no me, there's no bodies, there's nothing. It just isn't here. Right? There are a class of philosophers who preach this way, and they're becoming very popular, by the way. They have a lot more followers than we do. They're growing very fast. They have a strong influence in the popular media. I even remember before I joined the Hare Krishna movement seeing one, was a Star Trek television show like that, where you just think nothing exists, nothing exists, nothing exists, nothing exists, and it all disappears. And then there's nothing. Well, how do you live your life that way? How do you live your life if you think you don't have to talk about a cause? You don't have to talk about is matter the cause or is spirit the cause, because there just isn't anything. Well, what do? I don't know. If you really believe that, what would you do? The people who really, really believe that and try to live that way, they stop whatever activities they can in the world. And they just wander, like this Mahavir did that. Any of you familiar with Mahavir? So that's the sort of life that it would lead you to. Is that an attractive life? He got like a big thorn in his eye. You just left it there because it's not there. I don't have an eye. I don't have a thorn. And then what do you realize at the end of all that? After all that austerity and all that detachment, what do you realize? You're not even looking for any bliss. You just realize nothingness. Then the absolute truth is sort of just deep sleep. So what kind of a life do you lead then? If you're not willing to actually live that life, just travel naked, whatever food is given to you, whatever happens to you, never react to anything, never respond to anything, then I guess you live a life of deep intoxication. All right, then there's another philosophy that everything is karma, that there's demigods and there's some kind of God, but everything is just karma, everything is just my activity, that everything that's happening to me is a result of what I do, but there's not really any higher authority. There's not really anything beyond karma. Well, at least if you understand karma, then you'll try to be a nice person. because you understand that whatever you are will come back to you, and you'll see that your suffering is due to your own sinful activities in this life or in previous lives. So that's a little bit better. At least you have a little kind of meaning to things. But why is there karma? Why does the world exist? Why do those laws exist? What's the purpose of karma? Where are we going? Do we just go around the hamster wheel forever? You're just going to go up to the higher planets, then back down, then up and down and up and down. And can you ever get karma exactly right? King Rigotide, he couldn't do it. He tried to just do good works, and one little mistake and he got a lizard body. That's a kind of scary way to live. I don't know about any of you, but I'm really lucky if I can go a whole day without anybody being offended by me for anything. That's a good day. And sometimes I offend people without even knowing it. So I think I had a good day and I really didn't. There's actually somebody in the background going, oh, that Urmila said this. How do you only do pious activities, especially now? How do you buy only things that aren't products of violence? How do you do that? How do you live in the world without supporting any kind of violence at all? Very, very difficult. So I imagine that if you think that that's all there is, you're going to live in kind of a state of constant paranoia. I better make sure I only do the right thing. And then one can see that behind everything, there's a really nice person. Not just a person, but a wonderful person who has unlimited potencies and unlimited bliss and unlimited knowledge, and whose idea of absolute perfection is dancing and singing and playing his flute in forests and gardens full of fragrant flowers and clear water that's all alive and all spiritual, where nobody ever gets old. He's an eternal teenager, never gets older than 15. Dances with beautiful girls, eats tasty food by clear riverbanks, plays unlimited numbers of games, and is also tricky and clever and sneaky and funny. So what idea would we like to have? What kind of life do you lead then? Then you see that really everything I do does have meaning, because everything can be devoted to Krishna. Everything is ultimately spiritual. That the point of life isn't whether or not anybody cares what I do. The point of life isn't whether or not anybody remembers my name. The point of life isn't even if I can go through a day where everybody likes me. The point of life is if I can connect with Krishna. And that I can do no matter who I am and what I am, and even if I'm not smart enough to understand this purport. I can still connect with Krishna. And then everything regains its spiritual nature, and everything has meaning. Even my suffering has meaning. Even my so-called suffering is really the actions of a beautiful, playful, loving person. Just like sometimes we may go for medical or dental treatment that is uncomfortable, but we recognize the person who's giving it to us is giving it to us out of love. And then everything is filled with meaning, and everything becomes illuminated. All the gates of the body become illuminated. Our whole life becomes illuminated. It's as if somebody has painted a glow over everything we do and everything we are. Everything we are, even in this temporary world, then has eternal meaning and eternal value. So if you have to come up with a supernatural explanation for reality anyway, if it's impossible to come up with some purely logical explanation, if you have to go to the inexplicable, if you have to go to the wonderful, if you have to go to the amazing, why not go to something amazing that's attractive and interesting? Why go to something amazing that's depressing? And there's not even any evidence for it anyway. Whereas we have so much evidence for the existence of a personal God. Just go look at the daffodils outside. Just go look at the DNA. Anything. We have so much evidence for an intelligent personal God. And there's no evidence for some materialistic or agnostic philosophy. So that's why it matters what the cause is. And if we're not happy in our life, if we feel we're not going anywhere, if we feel that what I do doesn't really have any meaning, we go back to this root. What do I think is the cause? What do I think is the root of everything? Where do I think everything comes from? What is my philosophy of life? And if you have the right philosophy of life, and if you're actually living by it, then everything should be full of sparkle. So I went over by 7 minutes. Hopefully we'll be out of here in time for the wedding. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.